the research on vulnerability, Brené Brown and all that stuff. I've watched some of your Asking for Friends on authenticity, and I have got to tell you, here's the thing, I believe it conceptually, but it's not my jam. What should I do? Asking for a friend. Hi, I'm Karin, and I'm here with our next edition of Asking for a Friend from the road in Dijon, France. And this came up in our leadership program this week. And it was so interesting because one of our participants raised his hand and said almost this. And as he disclosed his concerns about being nervous about showing up vulnerable, that he was a very private person and he really didn't want to share, everyone in the room leaned in. And at that moment, he was building significant trust and connection because guess what? He was being vulnerable about not wanting to be vulnerable. So when you think about vulnerability, of course there's a range of things you can talk about. We've been talking about showing up interested and interesting. And when you think about being interesting, you don't necessarily need to talk about all of your personal details of your personal life if that is not what feels comfortable to you. There are a variety of other ways to show up vulnerable. First, you can, as this participant did, talk about be a little vulnerable about how this is uncomfortable for you. Another is, as you're going into projects, talk about your hopes and fears for projects or your hopes and fears for the next 6 months related to work. That also is vulnerable. And the other day we were having lunch with a senior leader who was talking about, she's one of the people who has some of the most executive presence that we have ever seen. And she was talking to the person sitting next to her about how that hadn't always come naturally to her and how she had to really work on her public speaking and feeling comfortable in facilitating large groups. And that is a moment of vulnerability. None of those circumstances were anybody saying anything about their personal lives at home. So those are a few of my thoughts. And now I'll turn it back to the LinkedIn community. What would you add? What advice would you have for someone who doesn't want to share a lot about their personal life, but also wants to continue to show up as a real human being at work? See you next time on Asking for a Friend.